as you can see on the screen, use your best words. Channeling Mr. Rogers to model and instill healthy language for kids, resiliency toolkits. And our amazing speakers today are Megan Schadlich and Tam Smith. And just a couple housekeeping things. Our session will end at 3:40. And then we have our shortest break of the day. There's only 5 minutes before the last session of the day, which I believe is our keynote for Thursday. So that will start at 3:45. Tam and Megan are both okay with adding questions into the chat, but they won't be answering any questions until and if there is time at the end of the session today. And with that, I'll hand it off to you guys. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. So before we begin, it's been a big day already for everyone, whether or not you're on the East Coast like Tam and I am confused about what time it is. So let's just pause and take a breath quickly. So if you are comfortable, we invite you to close your eyes or to soften your gaze and either look beneath your screen, at your keyboard, across the room, whatever works for you. And we're going to breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 1, breathe out for a count of 6, hold for a count of 1. And then we're going to repeat that a couple of times. So here we go. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold. You can repeat that or breathe naturally. And I just want to remind you that you are here for a reason. You are hired to feed your brain and share your knowledge. And that's what we're going to do today. Whatever happened before this is fine. It can exist outside of this room. When you're ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze and come back to us. So hi, I'm Megan. I am the person who thought up the Healing Library. I've written a book about teen and tween programming for libraries. I've written a lot for YALSA and won a couple awards from them. I'm currently a course consultant, host, and facilitator for a bunch of the professional development stuff that LJ and SLJ do. And then most recently, I just finished a year in the educators cohort with the Fred Rogers Institute.
Hi, I am Tamara Ellis Smith, but you can call me Tam. I'm a children's book author. I have 3 books published to date, with a few more coming next year, knock on wood. I write middle grade and picture books, and I live in Vermont.
This is, we had 2 minutes. This is our coworker, Selina, who is sick and unable to join us today, but we wanted to share a little bit about her. She's incredible. She is passionate about quality, compassion. She focuses in her practice on EMDR and cognitive behavioral therapy. She does a lot with families, focuses on youth, and she really focuses on a collaborative approach between the peoples that she's working with. In addition, she's also a proud member of the Sovereign Cherokee Nation. And at her request, we are doing a land acknowledgement today. Tam is joining us from Vermont, a place that was originally inhabited by the Abenaki and Wabanaki tribes. I am joining you from the southeast region of the United States, where the sovereign nation of the Cherokee people, who call themselves the Selagwadiai, originated. And Selina is in Virginia, where the Manahoac tribe were the original people on those lands. We have shared with you 3 pages of the sovereign nations, or the collaborative nations that they're a part of, as well as an artist or 2 from each of these regions. If you're looking to learn more, they're just fabulous, and we hope that you will take the time to learn about them. Today, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to quickly talk about supporting yourself, some of the negative stuff that we already know, but really we want to use this as a space to move into positive, into healing, into repair, into progress for you. After that, we're going to talk a bit about trauma-informed language. Then we're going to get into some deeper support systems that you can utilize to make your practice more elastic and impactful. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how the Healing Library can help with that. Any of these slides could be a master's level course, so we ask that you treat us with grace and yourselves with grace and recognize that this work is never done. So we're starting you on a journey today, but we may or may not be with you when you finish it. Okay, let's get into supporting yourself first. So we already know we have to put on our oxygen masks before we can help the person next to us. So let's hear what Fred has to say about this.
You know, everyone has lots of ways of feeling. And all those ways of feeling are fine. It's what we do with our feelings that matter in this life. I trust that you're growing in ways that will help you with whatever feelings you may have when you're a child and when you're a grown-up.
So what Fred just said is that all of the ways that we feel are fine. And this, I'm not talking about our kids, although of course it relates to them, but I'm talking about you right now. All of the feelings that you have in relation to the work that you do are fine. They're here for a reason. I trust that you're growing in ways that will help you with whatever feelings you may have when you're a child and when you're a grown-up. And when you're a grown-up, this doesn't go away. And finally, I hope you're able to grow to respect whoever you are inside. And I want you to take that as an emotional response. It's okay to be frustrated at work. It's okay to feel burnout. It's okay to take care of yourself. And he's right. Your work was challenging before our field got politicized or turned into a culture war. We're going to go ahead and quickly, we're going to explain some pretty common pitfalls just to give some parameters and to maybe spark something in you to research later if you feel like, oh, that sounds like me and I haven't heard that one before. So the first, put in the chat if you could for me. Oh, hold on. I'm just going to quickly make sure that's on. Yes. Put in the chat for me if you are familiar with these as we go along. So like a show of hands or a yes or an oh my gosh in the chat for vocational awe. This term was coined by a fabulous PhD candidate named Fabazi Ettar. We have a link shared later. Basically, the idea is that there are some professions in this world which are viewed as sacred, which are considered roles of saviors if you're in one of these jobs. Librarianship is one, healthcare is one, teaching is one, childcare is one. Typically, you'll find that these are feminine inhabited roles or feminine presenting inhabited roles. And what we find is that we will take sacrifices when it has to do with our Maslowian needs. We'll take that bottom tier and sort of negate it because we're not in it for the money. We will do anything for those little hugs and to light up their faces. But ultimately, what this winds up leading to is burnout. Compassion fatigue, let me know in the chat if you're familiar with this one or give a show of hands. Basically, when you're in a job that requires empathy in order to do this, you wind up giving so much and hearing some truly traumatic stories that it can lead to its own little micro version in your brain of burnout, where you are unable to actually engage with your own empathy in the way that is normal for you. What winds up happening when you are in these front of house or people-pleasing, people-person jobs is, can you actually perform them well if you don't have your own sense of empathy? And I'm just going to leave that open-ended because there's a lot out there. But what that's going to lead to is, again, more burnout for you. All right, show me down here in the chat or hands again, toxic positivity. Anybody either been a victim of this or a perpetrator? I know that at times I've done both without even realizing it. I happen to be an optimistic person by nature, a positive person by nature. And at times it has really not served my teams well. And now I know this. Basically, it's sort of things like good vibes only, or don't worry, or we don't have room for that negativity. Let's focus on the good, that kind of thing. What it winds up doing is making the person you're talking to who's trying to give you a relation of something very real that's happening to them, it winds up making them feel bad. So they're saying to themselves, oh my gosh, maybe this isn't a problem. What's wrong with me? Why am I upset when nobody else is upset? It doesn't allow them or you to be your authentic selves in this relationship that you're having, in this interaction that you're having. and it makes you appear inauthentic. And we know that kids can smell a phony like nobody's business. And so they get to the bottom of this really quickly, much faster than adults do. What that winds up doing is preventing your growth and the person that you're talking to. It prevents their growth as well. And guess what that does? It gives both of you burnout. Score. Finally, let me know one more time, diversity fatigue. Is anybody here on any kind of EDISJ, RJ committee or task force, or have you actually been hired for that? You might be more familiar with this than some others in the room. The basic idea is that we know, especially after 2020, a lot of these roles came into existence, but that didn't take any work off of our plates. And so the things that we already had to pay attention to, the things that we already had to prioritize, they still have this red threat level of like, you've got to take care of this. And so the diversity work that we so much believe in and that we're trying to contribute to and change our profession, change our field, improve our communities, winds up on a back burner or pushed to the side just for a minute while we figure this thing out. What that does is it can take that work and it can stagnate the work, or it can lead to a declining cycle of the work where everything you've built to get to this point is eroded away because the momentum has stopped. That can lead to organizational skepticism within your organization about their work doesn't really matter. She doesn't have a real job. It also looks like that from the outside. So organizations you may partner with may also get this vibe from you. That can lead to a lot of cynicism internally and externally. And guess what? More burnout. So what do we do about it? We're going to give you a couple of tips. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more work to be done. We can't give you everything, but this can help. So first, start with a breath. And I know we did that at the head of this session, but it really is important. And why I bring it up is that there is a nerve that goes all the way from your tippy top to the bottom of your spine called the vagus nerve. And when you stimulate that nerve, it stimulates within you a calming reflex. When you breathe in for a count and breathe out for a longer count, you're stimulating that nerve and you're already starting the physiological process of calming down. Second is make yourself a little TI script. This is a trick. I am guessing that most of the people in this room didn't get into librarianship for conflict. I know I didn't, and I suck at it. But I've got these little strategies that I use. And one is to have scripts in mind, trauma-informed scripts in mind. So when an adult comes up to my children's department when I was working in Chattanooga and would beeline for the bathroom, I would say, oh my gosh, I don't think I've met you before. You might not know this. I'm so sorry, but these restrooms are just for children. We're trying to teach them that this is a safe place and the adults they run into are other parents. Would you mind going to any of the other bathrooms are designed for adults in this whole building? That's an example. Third is to be honest. And I mean with yourself, and I also mean with your superiors. People cannot fix problems that they don't know exist. And unless we are communicating the fact that there is a problem, it will never get fixed, let alone brought up by someone else. 4 and 5 kind of go together. Set some dang boundaries for yourself and take your dang breaks. So the best explanation I've heard of this was from an LJ course I was hosting recently. And that person said, a rule is something you put on someone else. Sir, you have to stop yelling at me. A boundary is something that you put on yourself. Sir, if you don't stop yelling at me, I'm going to have to leave. And so he knows what the rule is without you having to say, this is a thing I'm doing to you. This is a boundary I'm setting for myself. The next one, shift from a feeling to a skill, I actually found while we were researching this slide deck. And the idea is that in these vocational awe positions, in these empathic positions, we tend to think like, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. No, no, no. You have a skill set. Your feelings are your skills. Your empathy is a skill. And if that is being tarnished, burnt out from any of those predecessor things that we just talked about, you aren't doing your job well. So your feelings are a power that you have. Your feelings are a skill you have. They should be protected, especially in this line of work. And then finally, this is one my therapist gave me, but don't feel like you're in this alone. It can be overwhelming to think about the problems of the world and think, what am I doing to fix it? Well, I'm doing this, but that's not enough. I'm not protesting right now. I'm not on the news talking about this. I'm not getting my friends worked up. I'm not writing letters to senators. What you're doing is the work. If you can do more than that, that's okay. But if you can't right now, that's also okay. There are millions of us around the world who are also trying to do the work. Allow us to do the work with you. Okay, Fred also says, set aside some alone time for yourself, because when you nourish yourself, you have more energy for nourishing your child. And when I say your child, I mean, they're all our babies. So the babies in your community. Okay, Selina has some tips to back this up as well. So the first is that self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And I love that. She recommends going out into nature and getting some fresh air. As she puts it, when we had caveman brains, we listened to the sound of birds as a sign that everything is okay. When the birds went quiet, you knew that there was a predator around or something dangerous happening. Third is to create a daily practice of reconnecting for yourself. And what we, or Selina, means by this, it could be big, it could be small. Even if it's getting into work every day, taking a minute at your desk to do a little box breathing, which is that in for some, out for the same, or slightly longer. Give yourself a box breath, set your intentions, remember your boundaries, and then proceed. And then finally, under more, we have, if any of this resonated with you, we've got links that you can use to learn more about these subjects. All right, we're going to move on to trauma-informed language. Give me a show of hands with some high fives or some raised hands or in the chat. Who here is familiar with trauma-informed language already, or trauma-informed care? While I get started, I'm going to peek at the chat. Okay, before we begin, there are big T traumas and there are little T traumas. A little T trauma might be something like, I got in a fight with my best friend today and we're going to be fine, but I'm annoyed and she was right. A big T trauma is, I lost my job, I'm getting divorced, someone I love very much died. Those kind of big T traumas. However, it doesn't matter if it's a big T trauma or a small T trauma, the experience that we have within those big T's and little T's psychologically and physiologically can do the same thing. So when we say what we're about to say, this has to do with the bigs and the littles, no discernment between the two. The first is that trauma-informed language is just a component of trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care focuses on the safety and support of the person with whom you're communicating, in this case, because it's language. Who can do it? Any of us, truly. You can do it, I can do it. You'll get there. Even if you're just trying little bits at first, you starting that is you doing it. The win, really, it can be done at any time. However, if you find yourself in a group setting, I talk about teens a lot because that was my last public library job. So I would say things like, you know, they're playing video games and you hear the F-bombs start to fly and you're like, Andre, I told you, you can't use that language in here. If you do that in front of Andre and all his friends, you are inadvertently traumatizing him. It's a little T trauma, but you're the one who's giving that to him. Instead, say, oh my gosh, guys, the language. Hey, Andre, come help me get some snacks for everybody so you'll put something in those mouths. Then when you're walking with Andre, say, man, you know you're not supposed to talk like that in here. Come on, can you do better? That kind of thing. The where, oh, I just said that. The when. Sometimes we think about deploying this stuff when we're in what we call a hot moment. And that's when the F-bombs are flying, when your toddler that you're dealing with is in a meltdown. Their brains physiologically cannot receive information when they're in a hot state. You have to wait until a cool moment when things are chill that you can begin layering some of this in and talking about it. Then when the hot moments come, that's already in their minds and you can start working on that. The why, it reduces instances of re-traumatization, but even if this is a person who hasn't been traumatized, I don't know if Andre's been traumatized. I don't have to be the one to inadvertently inflict trauma upon that person in that moment. As for the how, I have this great video that we're probably going to skip today so that we can have questions. It's about 4 minutes long and it's really fabulous. It's not library centric, but it is community center and health centric, which I think applies to what we're doing in our roles. Basically, you want to use first person language. And we know a lot of this already because most of us don't say homeless person anymore. We say a person experiencing homelessness or a person who's currently unhomed. That's a version of putting the person at the center and not the trauma. We avoid blaming the individual. Instead of saying, what's wrong with you? We say, how can I help? Does that make sense? I feel like we do this with kids already, maybe not their grown-ups so much, but it works on everybody, every age. We want to avoid any known triggers if this is a person who you know and you know their trauma. You want to respect their boundaries if you know them again, but then there are verbal boundaries, which trauma-informed language naturally takes care of for us, or pay attention to things like, someone's going like this to you, you know, we know that that means back off, you're making me uncomfortable. So go ahead and take a step back, put your hand over your heart instead of doing this back to them. Put your hand on your heart and show them, I'm hearing you. Okay, we want to provide options. And this is where this video is really great. There's also something called invitational versus commanding language that this video talks about. Basically, we want to invite people into healthy choices rather than setting rules for them that are healthy choices. So in the beginning, when I said, you're welcome to close your eyes or soften them, whatever feels right for you, that's a version of providing options and giving invitational language instead of commanding language. We want to give emotional validation. So that sounds really frustrating. I can tell that you're upset right now. I would feel terrible if that happened to me. These are all ways of, instead of enforcing toxic positivity into this, injecting toxic positivity into the situation, that we are then saying, I hear you, your experience. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. I hear what you're showing me and telling me. And then finally, respect the fact that your invitation to interact with them in this trauma-informed way is an invitation. It is validation of what they're going through. Okay, video for you for next time. But let's hear what Fred has to say about it.
No audio, I think, Megan.
Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. Why? Why now? All right, let's try again.
This is what I give. I give an expression of care every day to each child to help him realize that he is unique. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental. This is what I give.
Sorry, he says for mental health at the end. So again, just to recap, he said, I give an expression of care every day to each child to help them realize he is unique. That's recognition of the individual. I like you just the way you are. That's emotional validation. Feelings are mentionable and manageable. And this is a version of modeling trauma-informed language and trauma-informed care, which can be replicated. Okay, so tips from Selina. She agrees with centering the person, but also separating the problem from the child. And we got into this a little, but basically, kids can't always say what's wrong. And so instead of asking them to say, like, and we don't say, what's wrong with you, right? We say, what's happening? They might be better able to describe a feeling. Can you tell me what's going on? Can you tell me where you don't feel good right now? So those are Selina's tips. And then at the bottom, we have links again. So if this section resonated with you in any way, we've got areas for you to follow up on there. Okay, so really quickly in the chat, while we keep going, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. Could you please share any kind of trauma-informed phrasing or scripting or whatever you want to call it that has been helpful for you, because you never know if it's going to help the next person in the chat. And then really quickly, just to show you a little bit more about what Fred says, we're going to get into our follow-up strategies now. Probably you already know that Fred Rogers is the first person who said, play is the work of children. But this is where it came from. I grabbed it from the Fred Rogers archives for you. So you can see, he says, my thing is in the way. He says, for them, when children play, they're working. For them, play is both serious and necessary business. And then in his own handwriting, you can read, I once heard a 4-year-old at nursery school tell his mother, you can leave now, I have work to do. So we're going to get into some of these strategies. The basic idea, oh, yes, James, starting with, I noticed that. I love that. So starting with this basic idea of taking your trauma-informed, compassionate practice a little bit further. And so that could be in a dimension beyond books. We're just going to call it that. Here are some of the tools that we love. So Selina suggests circles, compliment circles, affirmation language circles, and community circles are all 3 brilliant ways to begin. If you aren't familiar with the idea of this, you may have heard of peace circles. All 4 of these have their roots in restorative justice, which is incorrectly and frequently attributed to the prison system, but it actually comes from Native American cultures. So Selina's got some write-ups here, as well as a work cited where you can find more information. And then I don't know if I put something in or not, I can't remember. But these are mine. I've got a collection of stuff. So the top 4 are 4 emotion books that I just highly recommend. I include them in almost every talk that I give, no matter the subject matter. The second grouping is toys. Really, these are like some fidgety things and some squishy things, some sensory things. But I highly recommend especially the last one, because we as a culture do not make a lot of room for anger and the exploration of anger as something healthy and to be learned from. But the squishy tomatoes can be really great for anger. And you can find resources about that in my kits that the team and I have created. The next, we have chill tools. And so this is everything from instructions on creating calm corners to opportunities to engage in ambiance or guided meditations for free. And then finally, I have some resources in case you're writing any grants or working on anything related to these fields that can help you. Okay, the last thing I want to do, I know I said we were kind of going in a direction like beyond books, but I also think there's a lot of power to taking these tools and utilizing them as you're doing weeding, as you're doing collection development, as you're doing any kind of auditing process. So add that trauma-informed lens to your title assessments. Tam is going to share with us because there's so much, some of what goes into writing high quality trauma-informed titles. And then we've got a really special treat. She's actually going to read her newest book to us. So while Tam gets sort of set up for that, in the chat one more time, please share a strategy that you found effective for deepening your trauma-informed work. And that could just be, like I said, it could be a book, it could be a toy, it could be an idea. Anything that's helped you in this vein, share it with the group, please.
Thank you, Megan. I have my mic off, yeah, on.
Oh,
yes?
You're good.
Okay, good. So I want to share a little bit about how I write books that hopefully fit into the bibliotherapy category. And I want to explore questions like, what is an author's intention when they create a book about grief or about divorce or some other emotionally charged topic? How does that intention show up on the page? What kinds of books are most conducive to fostering that kind of connection with kids? And when I say what kinds of books, I mean, what are the bones of those kinds of books? What kind of language do they use? How are they set up on the page? What is the structure of the story, right? How does an author create a story that's meant to be a support for a child, an invitation to share, to get a little intimate, to be courageous? How does a writer create a doorway, a creative doorway for a child to go through? Megan, you can quick go through these too if you want to. Yeah, and they'll be here for you all. So when I was in graduate school for writing for children and young adults, I researched and wrote a critical thesis on something called the reader response theory, which some of you or all of you may have heard of. It was developed by an educator named Louise Rosenblatt. Her theory is very simple, but it blew me away when I read about it, and I honestly think it's profound and critical to books, right? A book is not finished until a reader reads it. So it's not when I finish my draft. It's not when the publisher has created the book. It's not when it's in the bookstore. It is not until that little child is sitting with you and you are reading that book to them that the book becomes complete, right? The process of reading is active, it's shape-shifting. Its meaning depends on who is reading that book, right? What are their experiences? What are their hopes? What are their what emotional state are they in when they're reading the story? What just happened 2 minutes ago? You can read a story once, we all know this, and then you can read it again. And if you're a parent reading to a small child, you can read it 55 times, 100 times. And every time the story is different. So I love that, and it makes the most sense to me. And that is sort of a foundation for how I write. So thank you. So I write about things that worry or confuse me. That's the first incarnation of my stories. And then I shape them for the children I'm writing for. And they always start with a question or two. And it's going through the process of trying to answer that question that foundation is laid. And so I always try to keep in my mind that I am exploring, I am not explaining. So after that foundation is laid, you can forward again, Megan, thanks. then I try to write books that adhere to that reader response theory idea, or what I coined the vibrant triangle idea, which is that incredibly energetic alchemy of a book, an adult reader, and a child listener. And so, there are many ways that these components of a great story can be described. This is how I describe them. I think that a story that is going to really open those doors, those social emotional doors for kids, need to have spare and purposeful language. So what is the rhythm of the language? What is the rhyme scheme or not? Those kinds of sounds can open all of us up. Limited text on the page. So like literally having white space on the page for the child to enter the story. Back to structure. So is it a story that's a series of questions, or is it a story that is a list of things? Or is it a story where a child gets into a big mess and has to find a way out? What are these different structures that kids can relate to, kids can add to? If it's a list story and you're talking about all your favorite foods, then you might have the child shouting out what other favorite foods they like, things like that. And then the fourth is you want the narrative ideally to be an intuitive stepping stone for looking out into the world. So, first and foremost, we want these kids who are listening to the stories or reading the stories to feel safe. You want them to feel seen and validated. You want to give language to feelings that they might not have language for. But then almost equally as important, you want to leave that child recognizing, I'm not alone in this. And there are other kids out in the world who feel the same thing. So you're creating, that's the vibrant triangle, like spreading way out. So you're creating a connection with the book for that child, but then also the world. So presenting is not my best skill. It's a growing skill, but I would like to show you in action what I'm talking about by reading my recent book, Grief is an Elephant. So this is by me and illustrated by the incredible Nancy Whitesides. Sometimes grief is an elephant. You might hear her heavy pancake circle feet, or she might take you by surprise. It's hard to breathe under all that grief. Close your eyes. Nope, she's still there. Howl into her giant ears. She doesn't care. Push her with your hands, shoulder, forehead. Lean into her with your whole body. Now quick, slip out from under her and run. She's fast, but you're faster. Still, grief always comes back. Only now, she's a deer. Walk away slowly, backward. Shh. But grief's two tall ears easily track your footsteps. Find a four-leaf clover, or cross your fingers, or knock on wood. Hope with all your heart, and maybe you can make grief go away. Not forever, though. When grief comes back, she's a fox. Maybe offer her your hand, then touch the tip of her nose. Touch her small feet. They've traveled so many miles, but they still feel soft, like corduroy. What does she want? A story? A song? Some tea? Some toast? You know she hears you. She has those colossal, clever ears, but she doesn't ask for anything. She just settles in for a nap. When she's rested, she shows herself back out. But you're pretty sure she'll come again. You can watch for her by the window, or you can go outside and play. She might come when day turns to dusk, This time, grief is not an elephant or a deer or a fox, but a mouse. Look into her eyes. They are curious and kind. Stroke her gray cloud ears. Maybe grief is good at listening because she has those giant ears. Sit quietly with her. Then, when you're ready, talk to her. Tell her you sometimes trumpet to the sky. Tell her you sometimes bound and bay and squeak. Tell her most days, though, you feel small, like her. Talk until the stars begin to come out, until listening becomes light, until grief becomes a small, smaller, smallest firefly. You can hold her in your palm, uncurl your fingers, and watch her fly into the night sky. As her light flickers on and off, on and off, on and off, you'll remember. Remember and wonder, remember and miss, remember and love. That little tale. Okay, so very quickly, because I know you all know about resource guides, they can supplement a story and support a child. Grief is an Elephant has a resource guide that was written by a teacher in Maine, and you can find it on my website, along with a really fun art project for making firefly stuffies that actually light up. I want to wrap up by sharing an activity from my guide. So therapists actually use this a bunch, they tell me. They ask this question: who do you feel like today? What animal? And of course, you don't have to limit yourself to the 5 animals in the story. But it's a really cool way to, again, put different kinds of words to emotions, and for kids, sometimes easier words that they can then attach to their emotions. So what are the qualities of this animal, and how does that parallel with what you're feeling? Or drawing the animals too is a really cool way to get at this question. So this is another sort of deepening way to make that connection and to invite further exploration. So I'm going to turn this back over to Megan now, who is going to talk about something bigger than a book and bigger than a resource guide. She's going to talk about the healing library and the kits that she has created that are spectacular.
Thank you, Tam. But first, if folks want to put in the chat what kind of animal they feel like today, we were really hoping that maybe you would feel open enough to share with us after hearing that story. And it is such, I don't know if any of you cried. I always cry a little when she reads that book. But I want to share that I had read Tam's work before, and I'm so lucky to say that we've become friends throughout this process. And the more I talk to her, I mean, it's in 2 minutes, you heard how brilliant she is and what kind of thought process she puts into creating these titles. And for me, reading her work, I could sense it. And then talking to her about it, I got a much deeper understanding of what goes into this work. And to me, with what I do and what I'm about to share, I consider Tam's work like the gold standard for trauma books personally. So I'm just going to leave that as I go to the next slide and I start to share a little bit about my baby, the Healing Library. And if you've heard of this, again, in the chat, let me know, because I'll figure out what to skip. But basically, we're going to hear from Fred first, really quickly.
How do you begin to talk to a child, prepare a child to talk about divorce?
Well, first of all, I listen. I think that's the best way to talk about anything, is to try to find out. When a child asks a question, sometimes adults launch right into what they think the answer should be. I think maybe the best way is to ask another question and find out really what they mean by that. I remember a child one time asked, where did I come from? And the parent went into this long explanation about reproduction. And the child said, does that satisfy you? And the child said, well, Billy came from Detroit, and I just wondered where I came from.
Okay, and one more.
There isn't any one of us here, not any one of us, who hasn't had loss in our life. So consequently, we can be in relationship with other human beings.
How do you begin to
Okay, so just to recap again, what Fred said there in the first clip, it was funny. It was funny, but what he's really saying is that we don't, quote unquote, listen to kids. We think we know what they're asking, but we don't actually listen to them. And clarifying questions, which we know from reference interviews, are listening. And that's a perfectly reasonable tool that we can deploy as trauma-informed people to better care for the kids in our world. In the second clip, and I didn't get to play the whole thing, that's another little teaser for you later, but loss is a universal experience. And because of that, loss allows us to relate to one another. And if you watch a little further, he winds up saying, children need to talk about their feelings. So when we take all of that and put it together, it leads to something like my team and I have tried to create. And so basically the Healing Library, our goal is to assist families. We want to help them on their unique journey of healing before, during, or following a period of trauma in their life. And all of the materials that we create are available as a free PDF for anybody to download. And if you're a library, you can download, assemble a kit, and start lending it. Or you can point parents towards it as a resource that they can print off themselves or view as an online PDF. Sort of like LibGuides comes to life, but in a wild way. We utilize all of the following design elements in the kits: Every Child Ready to Read, principles, SEL core competencies, trauma-informed as well as wellness-informed language, holistic art, play, biblio, and eco-based therapy activities, restorative justice practices, wellness-informed language. I already said that, I have to fix the slide. And then dialogic reading guidance for parents. We all know every book a reader, but I should not be operating a chainsaw. I could figure it out. It would take me some time, but incorporating these dialogic reading guides allows parents to almost immediately dive deeper into storytelling with their kids and not assume that the book has done the work and now I can shake off this yucky feeling of having this difficult conversation. One thing I love is that a lot of tools are designed for kids, a lot of tools are designed for parents, but this one is really designed for kids and parents to come together, share experiences, and discover what should be in their unique toolkits. Fred, I'm going to include this. I'm not going to read all of it, but basically, where's the part that I wanted to share? People often ask why I don't teach the ABCs on my show. And down here, he says, if we help children develop those tools of education, accepting their mistakes, keeping on task when they're frustrated, knowing their ideas are important, they will want to learn such things as the ABCs. We currently have 6 topics available. And then coming in January of 2025, I actually am releasing my first draft to my team today. We have a kit coming on climate events and climate engagement for families. And this is my current team. This slide will have many more people because I've branched out of libraries for the new one. And since we launched, this slide is also inaccurate. The last time I checked, we had over 20,000 downloads, which just is so heartening. Again, there is a world of people trying to do this work. And so when we consider 20,000 downloads for this, that's nice. Oh, pat on the back. But really, to me, what's exciting is that that's 20,000 downloads. That doesn't mean that's 20,000 people who have it. It means from there it's being lent. And I've seen the map of where the downloads come from. We don't collect information, but it's global. And that's really heartening to me. So there are people out there who are doing this work in tandem with you. Every kit comes with a binder for families, and included in that binder are the following things: a lending guide for the library to know how long to lend it for, how to restock it, that kind of thing. Discussion guides for families for how to tackle a tough subject with a small person in your life. The healing activities are opportunities to explore your emotional development and needs. They come with all of the ready-use materials too, because what we don't want to do, at least on our end, is provide some adult who's also going through their own grieving process with a shopping list. There are acts of kindness, which are opportunities to regain power. There are customizable community helpers sections. So we have like the 10,000-foot national view of here's who's probably available to your child. But then we want you to stuff in trifolds and business cards and flyers from local organizations that can help. Then there are the picture books, highly curated. I have a ridiculously stringent and cutthroat process for accepting titles because of what you just heard Tam share. And all of these pages are available for families to keep when they return the kit so that they can continue on that journey and keep the materials they need. It's important to mention that these kits do not fix things. There is no fixing trauma. We move forward with it. And this is just providing families a way to do that with options that are healthy to see what sticks. It doesn't take the place of a therapist or mental health worker, and it doesn't turn you into one of those people either. But they do supply families with an introduction to healing and positive social emotional learning opportunities for their family through the discussion process, through sharing of stories and building empathy, through participation in therapeutic activities, and through encouraging families to not consider the work done, but to keep going after the kid is returned. And it allows you to invest in that side of wellness for your community. I have some instructions for how you can download them for free and get started. Also, we heard from more remote and then rural libraries that they needed them available for purchase. And so we were able to figure out how to do that for microgrant levels. And this is just a story I share sometimes, but also one more link to the grant language page. Again, even if it's not for our purposes, there might be information in there that's helpful for you as you're trying to achieve these kinds of goals with whatever work you're doing. So if we take it back to the 3 topics that we sort of focused on today, how THL can help you with those is through supporting yourself. It will allow you to support those barriers and protect yourself some, reduce your empathy burnout by allowing us to do some of the heavy lifting for you. We've already done the writing process. We've already done the research process. You can pass this to the people who need it and protect yourself a little. When it comes to trauma-informed language, this supports whatever goals you have in that arena because it has been written from a trauma and wellness-informed perspective that's been vetted by a licensed clinical social worker or a children's therapist. In addition, even if you're just looking to like brush up on some LCSW language, you can do that and you can get little pointers for how to engage or deploy trauma-informed language in the conversations you're having frequently with parents or with little people. And then finally, when it comes to follow-up strategies, this is one more tool. I don't know if you're familiar with SEL's there's a ring of circles. It starts in the classroom, and then the school, and then the community, and then children's own homes and their parents. And this allows you to get beyond those initial 2 rings and out into the community and spreading this in their own homes. Again, giving this as a gift to the parents in your life so that they can protect some of your empathy burnout. So in this chat, one more brainstorm before we take some questions or while you're asking questions in the chat. I know we don't have much time, but if you have an idea of other ways that this would help you or your practice of librarianship or your community, share because other people might be thinking in their own lane and might need help breaking out of that. But Sarah Ellen, what have you got? Did anybody send in a question while we were chatting?
I have not seen any questions in the chat. This has been an amazing presentation, though. There's so much to digest here. And I know I myself am just looking forward to getting into those slides and starting to look at some of those resources. So we have about a minute left in the presentation. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, we have this slide with some of our how to get a hold of us later, if you need any of that. And are the slides shared with folks?
I believe that they will be shared after the conference. Yes.
Awesome. Great. So we know that not everybody is a question on the spot person, and that's totally fine. If you think of something in a week or a month or in 6 months or a year, I just got a question from somebody I met 8 years ago, and I was able to help. So truly keep us in your little, we don't call them Rolodexes anymore, but we'll be here.
Absolutely.
Oh, Melody, that's so true. I'm just going to speak to this real quick before your break starts. If you're deploying something like a healing library kit, I highly recommend whoever you're putting in that community helpers section, they should know you have this, and you should be giving them a flyer to say, oh, your pet died? We have something available for that if you want to leave it on the counter or if you want to pass it to families when this happens. That's so true, Melody. Oop, my chat's jumping around. Oh, I will, Angelique. I've copied you. I'm ready.
We do have a question. Have you thought of making a themed book bundle for checkout?
Yeah, I think that's for Melody because she was saying that the titles are hard. This is like the Healing Library is that on steroids, but a book bundle can be really helpful. That's a great idea, MX or Ms. I don't know how you pronounce it. Oh, great. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you around.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the conference.
And to tomorrow. Enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Tam and Megan.
Thanks, Red, for the pronunciation help.
Thanks, Angelique. Thanks,
Thank
Sarah
you,
Helen.
Angelique. Bye, Sarah Helen.
Thank
I'll
you
send
both.
I'll send you
Yes,
the link as
goodbye.
soon as we hang up. Okay, Angelique?
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Bye,
Bye,
Leah.
Megan.
See you next time.
We'll have a couple minutes break here. I know it's very short, but we're almost through the end of our day. We have our keynote speaker, and that is Flavia Zuniga West, and she's going to be talking Celebrating Joy, Culturally Sustaining Practices in Centering BIPOC Narratives in Children's Literature and Art from 3:45 to 4:35. And we'll hope you'll join us, and that's in room A. So that check your document we sent. And again, that is going to be in room A. So you'll move on over to that room. Thank you so much.